Um, no, I think that was so we are having in person. We will still have Zoom available for those who can't come in person, but on March 4th, that's going to be our class on the Torah service. And thank you, Ellen. So the class on the Torah service, we are encouraging people to come in person because we want to train you in how to do the different pieces of choreography. And if anybody wants to learn how to be a gabbai, Sharon and I can help train you on that too. So a gabbai is the guide of the Torah service who helps all the moving pieces fit together and distributes the honors and activities and such. And so that is such a physical present sort of piece that we will have that class in person. It will probably be a more meaningful class in person if you're able to come. I will make it as Zoom accessible as I can, but there are certain things that will just feel different if you're in the space. So that'll be on March 4th. And then, yes, on March 11th, no class. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So before we jump into the Shema and its blessings, I would like to ask you, what do you remember from last week? So remember last week we talked about Psuke de Zimra, and I noticed that somebody was on the dock a few minutes ago, so perhaps whoever that was can share some of the things that they saw. Anything you remember. This isn't a quiz. It's just to start generating and jogging your memories. Yeah, Kristen.
That we skip a lot of it.
Ah, yes. Great.
Mm.
We do.
It's like peeling the husks away
Yeah.
to get
Say
through
more
the
about that.
layers of our hearts.
Right, right. Psuke de Zimra is all about peeling the husks away as we come into the service, right? And uncovering. That was a quote that we had from a Hasidic rabbi, and he said, "Why do we call this Psuke de Zimra, verses of song? Because we are mizamrim. We are peeling away the husks." And he says, we peel away the husks from one's heart and soul. We continue to do this through all of the hymns. We pare away the husks of the negative qualities we feel within us, and after we are ready to pray. Hannah?
That we broke into smaller groups and we discussed is to actually make our service meaningful in that section and came up with different ideas. And some of them were music, and let's see, Ashrei, that it should be joyous, meditation. There were others, but that's all that come to mind right now.
There was one I remember that was that involved dance and coming together in a spiritual circle, and we step closer and closer as we approach the moment of Shema, and then we're all connected in a circle when we say the Shema. That was great. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Kathy.
Yeah, we talked about it, making it more musical as well. And this is the section where we do Psalms.
Yes, lots and lots of Psalms. So this is a rabbinically designed section of service, but the material, the content of this part of the service is almost all biblical. Yeah. Patty.
Our class inspired me to get out of bed a little earlier last Saturday morning and get to the beginning of service. And I still didn't make the very beginning, but I would think I was pretty close to the beginning. And I enjoyed it. And it'd been so long since I'd been to the early part of the service. But I was grateful for your teaching. And I felt like I wasn't lost this time. And I understood what was going on, and there are some lovely melodies. And so I'd like to suggest that that be part of what people think about before we, discuss maybe creating something different, because it doesn't have to mean that we throw out some things that people enjoy hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. These are good, good recollections, good reviews. So today we are moving forward in the service, and we are going to focus on the section of the service that's generally called the Shema and its blessings. And so we'll go over what that means, like what is the liturgical structure? What's the chunk of service that we're talking about when we say that? Why and how do we say these blessings? And then where do they fit in our understanding of the world and of ourselves and of theology and God? So that's the arc that we're going on. But first we have to talk about the arc of these blessings. Yes, Sharon.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was doing a recollection and it feeds right into what you're saying. I had brought up how taking a pause before the Shema and really centering oneself and not just, zooming right into the next thing was really helpful and made it more spiritual and accentuating the echad at the end. And at the next service, you did that little meditation beforehand. And I think that really went a long way toward making Shabbat feel like something different.
I'm glad to hear it. It's interesting how just pausing in services, when we come to services and there's so much around doing and being and praying, just stopping for a second and holding that moment and letting that moment sit can really change our experience of the next moment that follows. Kathy.
What they do with the kids at Temple Israel in Minneapolis is they focus on shh and the idea of getting quiet and taking a breath. And I thought that was very nice. So.
Nice. At my brother's synagogue in Denver, they lead a meditation where they say, okay, we're going to sit and be quiet, and then we're going to think about it, and then we're going to realize something. And that is a shh,
Yes.
ah.
Yep.
Right, and you put them together.
Yeah, that's what they do in Temple Israel.
Yeah, nice. So when we talk about the Shema and its blessings, we actually start with something that is not Shema and its blessings at all. As we conclude Psuke de Zimra, we transition over into the Shema and its blessings with the Barchu, with call to prayer, right? And so this is not really part of the Shema and its blessings, but it does begin them and starts us into it. It's not part of the Shema and its blessings because it's not a blessing in itself, right? We have a very specific formula in Judaism for creating a blessing. What's that formula?
Baruch atah Adonai.
Yes, very good. So when we do the call to prayer, the Barchu, we're not saying that. And I will screen share. I'll link for you. I think I sent it in last week's notes, and I'll also link it in today's notes, the slide deck that we use. And so this is when we're talking about what is the Shema or what is the Barchu. This is what we're talking about, right? So that's our first piece of Shema and its blessings, and it's just the call to prayer. What are some of the things that you know? What are your starting points for Barchu?
Do you need the minion?
We need a minion, yeah. So everything before this has not needed a minion. You don't need a minion to say Birchot HaShachar, the blessings of the morning. You don't need a minion to say Psuke de Zimra. And there are some traditional practices that would include opportunities to say Mourner's Kaddish in those early sections of the service, but we don't have those in our service. So we don't include those. So in our service, the first thing you need a minyan for is Barchu. If you don't have a minyan, you skip it. Okay? And that's okay, right? There's no like, oh, our service is not valid. It's just, it's better if we have it, but if you don't have it, you skip it. We'll get more into the details of Barchu, the how, the when, and the why. But first, we start with Barchu, then we continue on into the first blessing. Ellen, yeah, you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, do we know why we need a minion? And why we skip it if we don't have one?
That is a good question. I think the reason would be that we have, that it's a call and response prayer. So you have to have somebody calling and someone responding. Of course, you could do that with 2. You don't need 10. I think the best answer is, I don't know the answer to that question, but I would love to look it up. So I will let you know. Yeah. Thank you for asking it. Sherry.
Is it the same Barchu that we do with Aliyahs?
It's the same. No, it's not the same.
Okay. I didn't think so because I don't remember hearing it somewhere else. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Because you, with the, it starts the same and then it continues differently. Right, the line of Barchu is the same, but then with the Aliyah blessing, you continue into the Torah blessing, and in the call to prayer, you do not. So we start with Barchu, and then we go into the first of the blessings, and we're going to come back to Barchu, and we'll go into more detail on each of these. I just want you to get the chunk of what we're talking about, right? So we start with Barchu, the call to prayer. Then we move into the blessing for creation. Now, in this service, this is where we really start to encounter differences between, in this section of the service, this is where we start to encounter differences between morning and evening, right? So we have a creation blessing no matter what. But in the evening, that blessing is Ma'ariv Aravim. And just so that we can see, oh, actually, this is a morning service, so you're not going to see it on the slides. So I'm going to put that into the chat so you can see how that's spelled if you're a visual person. So Ma'ariv Aravim. That's the evening version. And the morning version is Yotzer Or. Okay, and let's explain what these words mean. The word for evening in Hebrew is Erev, E-R-E-V. So Aravim is the plural of Erev. Right? So that's evenings. Now, one of the great things about Hebrew is that every word has a root, and a lot of those roots have related meanings when they're both in noun and verb form. So Ma'ariv is a verb, or the person doing, because present tense doesn't exist in rabbinic and biblical Hebrew, and that's a whole lecture on its own. But so Ma'ariv is bringing on the evenings, or if you want to, we don't have a verb for evening to make an evening in English, right? You have to use all those words together to make a. But Hebrew does. It's just like verbifying the word evening. And so what does that mean? That we're blessing God for making evenings, for eveninging the evenings. What are we blessing God for?
The new day.
The new day, right? Because this is the beginning of our day, right? This is the start. Because back in Genesis, when everything was created, it says, and there was evening and there was morning the first day, right? So we always start with the evening. It's also, to be honest, a much easier starting point than midnight. Who knows what midnight is? How many times has midnight slipped by you and you haven't known? You know, only on New Year's Eve, when everybody is literally yelling out the time of midnight, do you actually know exactly when midnight's going to be in a community setting. But with evening, you know that, the sun's gone down. It's very clear. So the creation blessing is Ma'ariv Aravim in the evening, and in the morning, you're not going to bless God actually you do, but you bless God Yotzer, or creator of light. If you were at the cantorial concert last week, or Rosh Chodesh For Shavat, we talked about Yetzirah as one of the levels of creation. And so Yetzirah and Yotzer are the same root, creator of light, or is the word for light. So we have these two blessings. The reason I said you don't bless the light in the evening and you don't bless the day in the morning, but then I stopped myself, is because it literally says in the Talmud, make sure to bless the light in the evening and make sure to bless the evening and the darkness in the morning. So there's a whole conversation about how both of those blessings actually do mention day and night both. But the fundamental focus is on whatever time of day you're actually in. And the theme of the prayer, the content of the prayer, is very much about creation. We move from the creation blessings into the revelation blessings. And revelation, is this revelation of, I had a great idea the other day, or I now, personal theological revelation? No, this is a revelation of Torah specifically. In Jewish theology, revelation of Torah is the central fundamental revelation. And so our blessings for revelation are Ahavat Olam or Ahava Rabbah. And I'll put those into the chat. Ahavat Olam is the evening blessing, or Ahava Rabbah is the morning. I think I've mentioned this in passing in the past, but these are, you see the word ahava or ahavat in both of these, right? That means love. So ahavat olam means eternal love, and ahava rabbah means great love. Because in Jewish theology, God showed that God loved us by giving us commandments and rules and structure. And we're going to come back to that idea later on, why does that still matter to us now? Does it? But those are the revelation blessings. Then we have the Shema and its biblical passages. Okay, so Shema is our central statement of faith, right? Shema is our really fundamental verse from Torah. So I'm going to share the screen again so we can just make sure we're all looking at the same thing here. So when we recite the Shema, it is not a rabbinic blessing. We are just reciting a verse from Deuteronomy chapter 6, specifically verse 4. And when you look in the Torah, you can see that it's written just like it is here. And one of the things that Sharon alluded to earlier is that you really emphasize, you have a big dalet. This letter is the D at the end of the word, right? Echad. And so there's a tradition of really focusing on enunciating that dalet. There's also a big ayin, this level here, the end of the first word. You can't, Ashkenazi Jews don't pronounce ayin. It's a silent glottal stop. And so we don't emphasize that, right? There's no vocalization for it, Shema. Right? You can't make that any bigger. I say Ashkenazi because Sephardic Jews actually do pronounce the ayin. There's a deep guttural in Arabic that is also used in Sephardic Hebrew, but you don't emphasize that in the same way that you do a dalet because it comes across so clearly. And then you continue from Shema straight into the next verse in Torah, except for the fact that we have this extra line, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, right, which is not transliterated here, unfortunately. And but we can fix that. No, I can't. It's a photo. Okay, well, sorry about that. But this line, what this says here, and you can see in the 8 Ratzon prayer book when you use that one, is blessed is the name of, blessed is the Shem Kevod, is the name of God's glory. His sovereignty will be forever and ever. That is not a verse from Torah. That is a rabbinic construction that we get from Talmud. And that's just something that we say after we've said a super sacred thing. Shema is our main example of it in our service, but there are also a few other places where we would say it. There's a prayer we don't usually do on Friday night, but it can be part of a Friday night service called Ana Bekoach, And that prayer is a long. It's a 42 word. It's a 42 word acronym poem for a 42 letter name of God, because the Kabbalists have a tradition of very, very long names of God that no one can pronounce. But since when you've sang that prayer, you've done the acronym of the name of God, a tradition developed to say that this line after that prayer too. So just so you know, when we say that, that's not part of our Torah text. And so when people say the Shema, they'll often say the Shema line nice and loud. The traditional, the Seltzer melody, this was written by a guy in the 20th century, so traditional is relative. But we sing, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then this line, Baruch Shem Kevod, is often done very quietly, if not silently. And that can be really confusing if you don't know what's going on in services. Right? It's like, where are we? What's going on? So that's what that is they say, is people saying that second line very, very quietly or muttering it to themselves almost silently. And that's because it's essentially a comment on the sacredness of the Shema. It's not part of the Shema biblical text itself. Kathy and then Sherry.
In the Reform movement, it's said out loud.
Sometimes. Yes. I have been in Reform congregations. I have both.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But yes, it is much more often said out loud. And that was done so that people know it. Right? Because a lot of people are going to services who aren't taking classes like this. And so you want them to be familiar with the text and the practice of saying that line following the Shema, so they say it out loud and clearly.
And you also do, is it on Yom Kippur?
Yes. Yeah, you say it fully loudly on Yom Kippur in all services. Yeah, very good. Sherry and then Sharon.
I want to request that line is put on the slide deck because I don't memorize. And I know that there's that line, but I never remember it. And I'd like to see it and do it to myself.
Yeah, the problem is that the slide comes from a picture of Sim Shalom.
Okay, I'm just making a request.
Almost nobody says it out loud who comes from the former conservative congregation. Almost
I know,
nobody.
but we learned it for our Nashot Mitzvah, and but I don't remember it. And you could put silent, and I know that that's hard, but Val was able to do that with the Blessing Israel in Kaddish too. Somehow she changed that slide or found another slide. So if somebody can find it, fine. It's not the end of the world. It's just a request.
Yeah, I hear you on the request, Sherry, and if we we can, if not change it in the short term, certainly when we change the slides, change it in the long term.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you.
For sure.
Thanks for making the suggestion. Sharon.
Coming from the conservative side where it was never said, and now having heard it said quietly, I was at a Reform community where the rabbi who was leading the service said, when they came to it, I can't hear you. And had everybody say it louder, and it was so jarring, and I knew why, you don't say it, repeat it. So I was wondering if you had a comment on that.
It sounds like this rabbi wanted everyone to know the text. And so wanted that to be clear, and perhaps had a theological reason of also, wanting to have that not blessing, but that line of praising God to be said nice and clear, which theologically I get it. And ritualistically, yeah, I can imagine if you're not used to it, it would be distracting. It's not my style usually to interrupt prayer to give instruction. And different people have different styles. So we go straight from this line of Shema that we sing to a melody that was written, and there are different melodies we can sing it to, right? Like I just gave you one melody, but I can think of 2 or 3 others off the top of my head. So there are a lot of different ways to sing this line. It's so central. And we do this seated, but there is a Reformed tradition to do it standing, because it is such a central and important line of prayer, of Jewish thought, that the idea is, why would you sit in the central statement of faith you should stand out of respect for that. So you see many synagogues that stand for the Shema and continue into the Ve'ahavta. You might have noted this little line at the beginning that says, if there is no minion, add God is a faithful sovereign. So this is a practice, I actually can't find where it comes from, but this is just a practice where if you don't have a minion, you add these 3 Hebrew words, El Melech Ne'eman, before you say Shema. So if you come to Tuesday morning minyan that we have once a month and we don't have a minyan, we will say this before we say the Shema. Right. What we call the Ve'ahavta, liturgically speaking, is actually just part of the Shema. It is the first of the biblical passages that continues from the Shema, and it's not even jumping anywhere. If you're chanting, I have a friend whose daughter is becoming bat mitzvah in August, and she was not a kid very engaged in the process, and they chose her Torah portion so that she would have this parsha so that she could just chant the Shema and Ve'ahavta and wouldn't need to learn any new Torah for her bat mitzvah. Does make it very easy for her, and she's having a bat mitzvah and it's all working out. So it's straight from Torah, right? As soon as you open it up in Torah, you're going to start doing the things that you hear in services, right? Ve'ahavta, right? Or so there's slight variations between Reform and conservative chanting styles on this. Very, very small differences that mainly musicians are paying attention to. But the old Reform version that the conservative movement has done and continued to do is what I just did. Ve'ahavta. And the newer Reform version goes Ve'ahavta. Small detail. We tend to do the former here, and that's like either one's good. So just so you know, if you ever are sitting in services somewhere else and you think, huh, what was that? It's just a slightly different way of chanting. There are a lot of different ways of chanting Torah all around the world. It changes by geography, and the one that we do is German. Yeah. Lee.
Yeah, just a clarification. I thought you said that starting with the Shema, you need a minyan, and then there's this Al Melech Ne'eman. If you don't have a minyan, is that a minyan on Saturday but not on weekday, or?
Good question. You need a minyan for Barchu. You don't need a minyan to say the Shema.
Okay.
Yeah. So Barchu needs a minyan, and if you don't, that doesn't apply to the whole series of blessings to follow. That's just this pair of lines.
Okay, got it.
So you can do Yotzer Or without a minyan. You can do Ahava Rabbah without a minyan. I think I'm jumping around a little bit today, but yeah, you can do Shema without a minyan. So we start to do these verses, right? We chant Ve'ahavta, and these are central. This is such core text for us. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words which I command you this day, you shall take to heart. Teach them diligently to your children, and recite them at home and away, night and day. Bind them as a sign upon your hand, and as a reminder above your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. A lot of this text has had ritual impact on our practice. So, first of all, there's a halachic obligation to say the Shema twice a day. In the morning and in the evening. Where does that come from? When you lie down and when you rise up. There's actually a debate in the Talmud in Tractate Brachot about whether say them, these words, is referring to Torah study or to reciting the Shema. But clearly in prayer practice it has become reciting the Shema. And there's rules, by the way, about what counts as night and what counts as day, because how could we have this without guidance and clarity? So just in case you're wondering, the evening blessing can be done from the time that the sun sets and you can see the stars until midnight. And the morning blessings can be done from just before sunrise through the first quarter of the day. The rabbis divide the day into 4 quarters. And so it's essentially until about just before noon. You can say your morning Shema and have fulfilled your obligation if that's what you want to do. Kristen.
Sorry, is the bind them as a sign upon your hand and as a reminder above your eyes, does that impact where tefillin are worn?
That is exactly where that comes from. Yeah, very good. Yeah. And there's one more thing here that we see often in Jewish practice. Inscribe them upon the doorposts of your house and on your gates, right? That's where our instructions for having a mezuzah come from. And this is the text that's inside the mezuzah. So you can have an empty box on your door, but that is just a mezuzah case. That is not a mezuzah. For it to be a mezuzah, it needs to have the scroll inside. And that is actually often the more expensive piece. And that is expensive because it's written by a sofer, a scribe, who's been trained in how to write biblical text and other important documents. And so, like, sofer can also make a ketubah for a wedding contract. And that is a specialist position, and they need to sustain themselves. And so that's why those papers and those parchments cost money.
And it's really teeny.
It's teeny tiny. Yeah, I would never be a good sofer. I have terrible handwriting if things get that small. Okay, Ellen and then Sherry.
I had a question, but I found the answer.
Okay, great.
Sharon, I was thinking about you as a calligrapher and other kind of artist. Have you ever done one?
No, I've never done it. Well, I mean, you have to be specially trained for that.
Sure.
You have to be a
Okay.
sofer, but I cannot write that small in calligraphy.
I understand.
So when we're chanting this in services, we finish this first paragraph, and this paragraph, so to speak, is verses 5 through 9 of Deuteronomy chapter 6. And then we go silent. But look where this text is from. This is Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 13 to 21. And this is, once in services have we read this in English aloud. The nickname for this section is the first three words, which in Hebrew are V'haya im shamoa. So I'll put that here. V'haya im shamoa. That's in the chat now if you want to see it in transliteration. And so that's these first opening words of the passage. This passage is a different focus. How would you have described the focus of the Shema and the Ve'ahavta?
God.
God, yes. Yep. And now it says, if you will earnestly heed the mitzvot I give you this day, to love Adonai your God and to serve God with all your heart and all your soul, then I'll favor your land with rain at the proper season, in autumn and in spring, and you will have an ample harvest of grain, wine, and oil. And it continues that essentially, if you follow God's rules, then the weather will respond appropriately. God will treat you with appropriate weather in its season. And why do you think that was such a powerful idea for the ancient Israelites?
They needed to eat.
They needed to eat. And Kathy, do you want to add to that?
No, it's an agricultural society, so there were a lot of famines, and this would have been very, very important to them that the rain came on time. I mean, we say that extra blessing also about the season, depending on what season we're in.
Right. Would you have seen this if ancient Israelites stayed in Egypt? You would not have, because Egyptian agricultural cycles and well-being are not dependent on rain. They're dependent on the flooding cycles of the Nile, right? That the Nile floods and then recedes, and thus everything gets its water, and then it has that water soaking into the land until the next flood. And the agriculture is built around that. Israel doesn't have a major river. So all of the agriculture in Israel is relying on rain cycles. And nowadays, it's not about agriculture cycle. Well, it is about agricultural cycles, and all the more so about drinking water in a more densely populated region than it used to be. Right. So I mean, Israel is one of the leaders in desalination and has huge desalination plants to be able to create drinking water from the ocean, because there's no river or even like aquifers to draw any water from. Certainly no snowmelt. So it's a very water insecure region, and it's going to excuse me, become more and more difficult with climate change. And so this passage was actually first rejected by Reform and conservative rationalists, not to the point that they took it out of the Siddur, but to the point that they don't say it, because it was thought, well, that's silly. Obviously, following God's law doesn't bring rain, right? We know better. We know that that's not how weather cycles work. And then there's a rising environmentalist movement, Jewish environmentalist movement, that's reclaiming this and says, if we follow God's law of taking care of creation, then the rains might come in their season in the appropriate amount like they should. Right? Hopefully, right? That's the goal. Still not to the point of saying, if you say your Shema twice a day, like you're technically supposed to, then rains will come in its season, right? We're not saying that, but that there is a reinterpretation of this passage. So we always have when you're leading services, you always have the option of reading this text. You can read it silently, you can read it aloud, you can raise it up and talk about it. It's not an unimportant text, but we often skip right through it when we're doing our Shema and blessings. And then the next one after this, the last one, is called Vayomer, which is just the first word, Vayomer. And this is a passage from Numbers, as you see here, Numbers 15, verses 37 to 41. And this is all about tzitzit. Tzitzit are the fringes on the edge of your talit. And I'm going to show you something. Great. Thank you to whoever returned my talit to my office. So this is when we're blessing the tzitzit, not all of these are tzitzit. Not all of these are ritual fringes. Yes, they are all physical fringes, but the only one that's a ritual fringe is the long one. The short ones are just decorative. And so when you're saying this blessing, there's a practice to gather all each one of these long ones is on a corner. This is a rectangular garment, right? And you gather them all together, and well, it's easy enough to do. So you're wearing your talit, and you gather your tzitzit together. You actually do this in the end of Ahava Rabbah, when we're talking about bringing all of our people together from the four corners of the earth. If you see somebody gathering their tzitzit, that's why. Because these are symbolizing the four corners of the earth, and we might all gather ourselves and unite the Jewish community together. Val has a lovely interpretation of gathering the corners of ourselves as we come into Shabbat, which I love. So you have your four corners, and you can wrap them around your hand, whether you do it in 3 fingers or 4, up to you. I tend to do 3 because, well, we kind of skip through the covering our eyes for Shema, but we cover our eyes to turn inward, to have this be a very private moment of prayer. And then when you're blessing, when you're saying this passage from Torah that commands us to have fringes on the corners of our garments, then every time you say the word tzitzit, you kiss them. Right? So we're chanting and we say, right, Vayomer Adonai al Moshe lemor, daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta elehem, ve'asu lahem tzitzit. Al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam, v'natnu al tzitzit. Right? And I'm emphasizing it here to make the point. And then there's one more. And so every time you hear that word, those 3 times you hear that word here, and you can see them also actually in transliteration, put tzitzit on the corners of your garments, thread of blue in the tzitzit, look upon these tzitzit, and you'll be reminded of all of the mitzvot of Adonai and fulfill them. Right? That's the reason we're supposed to have fringes on the corners of our garments. is to remember God's commandments. The traditional reason, right? I know a feminist Israeli rabbi who actually only wears clothing that has fringes on it. And that's her form of living this blessing, this mitzvah, right? And there are some people, traditionally speaking, Orthodox men, but now there's people of other denominations as well, who wear what's called a talit katan, right? This is your talit. Talit katan means a small talit. And that is a little vest that you wear underneath your clothing. It's just a thin white cotton vest. And you wear under your clothing and it has fringes on it. And there's different styles. Some people wear their fringes hanging out so you can see them as you walk around. Some people tuck them into the pants because there's no requirement that they show. So you have but by wearing that, you are fulfilling this commandment to wear your tzitzit and remember God's instructions. Okay, we have hands up. Patty, and I think, I don't know, Riva, I saw your hand up if you want to, nope, okay. And then Aaron's comment in the chat. So
Yeah,
Patty.
my question was the one that's in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay, so we'll come to that in a second. Patty, go ahead.
Can you show us that text again?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a question about it specifically? You want to have another
I'm still unmuted, yeah. Just that this is a place where I got a little turned around sometimes. And I remember Rabbi Sammy instructing us about this. And I liked it, but it always catches me by surprise that, oh, we're doing that one and I didn't get my my seat ready.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. Now, the other thing that makes this even more confusing in a lot of synagogue practice is that it's usually done silently. I like doing it aloud because I want us to know the text, like those Reform rabbis who had the second line of Baruch Shem Kivod. But this is, I want us to know this, and I learned it. I only learned it because when I was a kid and a middle schooler at Gideon Hausner Jewish Day School in Palo Alto, they had us do this, so I learned it, but we weren't wearing tzitzit. We just started chanting it. Usually, everyone comes together and starts going aloud at Leman Tizkaru, which is the ending few verses, this section here, right? Ani Adonai Elohechem is the ending there. So that's the part that we know really well. People do that in synagogues all over the place. Doing the tzitzit part is a little bit less common. And so if you're in a synagogue and you see people mumbling and kissing their tzitzit, this is the passage that they're doing. Okay, before I go to Sharon's hand, responding to this question about blue. Actually, I'm going to share that just in case people are wondering where the blue comes in. Okay, see this? Bind a thread of blue to the tzitzit. Yeah, so the Hebrew here is for a thread of blue, patil, that's a thread, techelet. And techelet is an unusual word. We really only see it in this context. And the problem with words that we only see in one context is we don't really know what they mean. We know it's a color. It's been passed down to us that it was blue. What shade of blue? Nobody knows. And so there are theories that it was a specific kind of bluish purple color that was created, maybe the color of Gail's hair, that was created out of, the mucus of a certain snail that grows on the Mediterranean coast, that when it's either mucus or blood is exposed to oxygen, it turns this bluish purpley color. And that was, we see that actually in this week's Torah portion. They talk about creating garments of blue-purple for the Mishkan, for the dwelling place, the tabernacle for God. And this might have been that same bluish purpley color. But since nobody knows what color it is, it's often not included in modern tzitzit. There's a little bit of a, well, we're not really sure what it is anyway, so how can we include it? And there's a little bit of a, we don't want to get it wrong, so let's just not include it. Right? You can get a talit that has the blue thread, a blue thread in it. And when you are buying a talit for yourself, they actually, there are two pieces of the talit, right? There's the cloth design, and then there's the fringes. And you order the fringes on top of the cloth design in a lot of places. And so they'll ask you, do you want a thread of blue in your fringes? And if you do, it's a lot more expensive. Because that's like this sacred special extra piece. Any other questions about the blue? Riva, are you raising your hand in response to that? And Kristen too? Okay. Sharon, is your hand also up about blue, or shall I come back to you after we finish this?
Now I have a comment about blue, but I had something to say before.
Okay, say your comment about blue. If you can save the other thing, and we want to finish blue first, and then we'll go to that.
There are people in Israel who claim that they have figured out exactly where it comes from, and this snail. And so there is a movement amongst some people. One of our congregants wears a blue in hers, and that you can specifically buy it because they think that they have done the archaeological research or something. You probably know far more about this than I do, but this happened in relatively recent times that they think they have figured it out. And so now there is a push to put the blue in it.
Right. But the challenge is, of course, snails are very small, and scarcity makes something valuable. And so that's part of why it was special in the first place, and why it's still expensive now, right? Because nobody's, like, as far as I know, farming these snails. So, yeah, quirks of religion. I bet that wasn't on your bingo card for the day. Riva, go ahead.
Well, I feel like I have a memory of the word chelet being used in modern Hebrew, like meaning just light blue or something like that. So I'm surprised to hear that or is that not true?
No, it is a shade of blue. Like, we got that much, that it's a color, but it's hard to, there's no context we have, biblically speaking, that gives us more detail, you know? So I'm not sure.
But in
about
modern Hebrew, just refers to like light blue. That's my memory. Is that not?
Memory is light blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not sure. But oh, thanks, Aaron. That's great. So yeah, it's possible. I don't know about the light blue specifically, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. That means I don't have a specific memory of that. And I just to add context or comparison for unique biblical words, like we get a lot of those in the list of birds that are not kosher. And so you have this list of things, and you know they're all birds from context, but like, are you talking about an osprey or an ostrich? Well, if you don't have somebody describing what the bird looks like, you don't know which bird it is. It's kind of the same thing with the blue. Kristen.
So in our sanctuary specifically, I haven't tested it with a regular like black light or UV light, but in our sanctuary specifically, when the light comes through the windows, my tzitzit glow fluorescent blue. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed. Other people have noticed, like my tzitzit glow under like UV light or black light, but they look blue. So I don't know. It's like God's light being like, yeah, this is the blue it's supposed to be, but you have to look at it under a black light. I have no idea. It's just a couple people have even commented, and I'm like, I don't know why it does that, but it just does.
Oh, that's super fun. I love that. I remember coming into our sanctuary before my first High Holy Days there, and seeing the cast of red light across the room, and thinking, well, if I'm going to wear white on Yom Kippur, do I actually need to wear a light shade of green? It's like a counterbalance. Anyway, okay, Julia.
All right. I was actually hearing that tzitzit need to have one thread blue. Not sure where exactly I got it from. So my question at this point is it actually kosher and correct not to have the blue in it, as it is directed to have it? So can you comment on that, please? Thank you.
Yes. So it's often considered It is acceptable to have tzitzit that are white. If you have tzitzit that are white, they are kosher. You are fine. You see mine are white. If you have blue, it's considered kind of more commendable because it's trying to stick closer to the text. This text specifically.
Which text is that?
That is, yeah. So
it is from Torah, right?
It is from Torah. It is Numbers 15, chapter 15, verses 37 to 41.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Riva, last comment on blue. Then we're going to go Sharon's comment and then take a quick break.
Wikipedia says that the flag of Israel emulates the Tchelet color.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, as if that's a given, that's the shade.
Great. I mean, if you ask people, Riva, we've actually talked about this, right? If there's any color that's Jewish, it's blue, right? And nowadays, outside of the Jewish community, people are only really familiar with that through the flag of Israel, and so they think that if you're showing Jewish stuff that is, and you're having blue be a unifying color for that, it's an explicitly Zionist thing, when actually Israel got the blue from Judaism, right? From Jewish tradition, not the other way around. But that's a complicated thing to articulate, and usually symbols don't have that level of detail. So it gets lost in the mess. But that is, yeah, blue is our color, which is great to me. I love that. Sharon, go ahead. What's your thought or question that you've been holding patiently for a long time now?
I'm very patient. You said, oops, I skipped over covering our eyes at Shema.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reflect on that for a moment. In different places, I have learned just close your eyes, cover your eyes, or make your fingers in the shape of a W for shin and put that over your eyes.
Yeah.
That's question number one. Number two is, when I'm teaching kids, I really, they're always surprised that the talis isn't the important thing. It is just the vehicle for the tzitzit.
Yeah.
And I think most people, you mentioned it, I just think that is really a significant thing, that it's not the talis, it is the tzitzit that is important.
Yes. Yes. Thanks for emphasizing that. And also the note about covering eyes. The point of covering our eyes in Shema is to focus inward and to add intentionality to this very central statement of faith. So whether you do that by covering your eyes, whether you do that by closing your eyes, these are all just minhag. These are customs, and different places have different customs. There's a difference between custom and law. Right? So if something is a custom, it does mean it has authority, because it means that it's a tradition and people have done it and that connects us to that tradition. It doesn't mean we have a, quote, halachic or Jewish legal obligation to it, right? But it's a lovely custom, and I love it when we find different ways to do it. And the shin is that first letter of Shema, and the shin letter looks like this, right? Like the three prongs going up, and so people will cover their eyes like that. And thus bring more of shin into their intention. Okay. With that, we're going to pause. We're a little bit overdue. Oh, okay, Ellen, last thing. And then we're going to take just a 5-minute break and come back.
I thought the 3 fingers were for Shaddai.
They do share that, right? That is also a thing. So Shaddai is one of the names of God. And so that is, so the shin is very symbolic of Shaddai. And if you really want a deep and spiritual talk on this, you should reach out to Amy Golant, who does a lot with shin and its symbolism. But when we're doing it for Shema, it's a little bit of both, but it's primarily connected to Shema, the word Shema. Okay, everyone, let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are going to jump in and get started right away because we only have 25 minutes left. And there are a few things that I want to go back to and a few things I want to make sure we have time to talk between us and jump into some of the content here. The thing I want to go back to first is Barchu and what we do when we do the Barchu. So we talked about how we need a minyan, right? We established that. And we talked about how this is just two simple lines. I don't think spoke about how we rise for Barchu, but that's simple enough. We always make sure to rise for the call to worship as we enter this part of the service. The thing I really want to make sure that we talk about is the bowing and the responsive nature of it. So the first thing is the bowing, right? Actually, no, I'm going to switch that because the bowing will follow the response. So sometimes I'll try to explain this quickly in passing in services, but better to have a little time to dive into it now. A call to worship is not something targeted at God. Even if the text is praise Adonai, the exalted one, there's no second person in this. It's not blessed are you, Adonai. It is in the imperative form. Bless God. And so when I sometimes explain this in services quickly, I'll say, this is us saying, leader says, hey, you ready to pray? And everybody else says, yes, we're ready to pray. Because what did we just finish before this? Psuke de Zimra, and Birchot Shachar before that, right? The verses of the blessings of the morning and then the verses of praise. Those first two sections of service were all about spiritual warm-ups. And so now the question is, are you ready? And so the leader begins by saying this first line, Barchu et Adonai Hamvorach. That's why it says here chazan. Chazan is the Hebrew word for cantor. And in more traditional spaces, the rabbi is the teacher, the cantor is the prayer leader. And so it says here that the chazan, the cantor, says Barchu et Adonai Hamvorach, right? And they're giving you that first line. Congregation says Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed, and then the chazan repeats it. So functionally speaking, this is, hey, you ready to pray? Congregation says, yes, we're ready to pray. And then leader says, okay, great, we're ready to pray. And that's that call and response back and forth. There are some melodies that we sometimes use that eliminate this call and response nature. And it always chafes for me a little bit because I like the function of the call and response, right? And it's not a bad thing for us to all sing together. I love all singing together, but I want us to know that this is a thing, right? That we have this responsive nature, and it's it kind of develops the relationship. So you don't just have this, like, if you have constant togetherness throughout the service, it loses an element to not have that back and forth with the leader. And so sometimes I'll do this in the nusach because that really emphasizes the call and response. And so what that sounds like is, on Saturday morning nusach at least, it says, Barchu et Adonai hamevorach. And then the congregation responds with the same melody with the second words. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. And then the leader changes the melody a little bit in their affirmation of what the congregation has said. And that's to indicate that they're closing it out. The melody of a nusach changes when you're reaching the end. It's like a punctuation mark. So the leader's response will go, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed, or va'ed. It doesn't need to be so precise, but that gets a little bit lost in the shuffle sometimes. So if you hear a leader give you the nusach beginning, you respond to them in exactly the same melody they just gave you. And the other thing about this is the bowing. Leader bows when they do their line. Congregation bows when they do their line. Leader does not need to bow a second time in the affirmation. And this gets very confusing, right? Because the leader is leading, so people often bow when the leader bows. But if we're going to make a call and response, then you bow when you're doing your part, and they'll bow when they're doing their part. Any questions about that? Okay, great. So I wanted to make sure that we covered that because I see the confusion happen in services sometimes, and now you all can be the plants. You're the ones who know the way to do it, and so others will follow your lead. So the other thing I want to jump
Rabbi,
to.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I can't make my hand work. When one bows, one bends the knee and then bows, yes?
Yes, great. Okay. So you know how we talked about roots in Hebrew and how a root has the same meaning or a set of meanings across different words? Okay. We know that the root for bless is bet is BRCH, right? Bet resh chaf. We have that in Baruch. We have that here in Barchu, different conjugations of the same word that means blessing. You know how to say knees in Hebrew? Birkayim. It's the same root. We bless with our knees. Because when we bow, we've got our prayer book, right? And we bend with our knees and then we bow over. Okay? And that's kind of where that comes from, right? That the bend with the knees is actually part of the thing. Because it's related in the root. If you just bow from your hips, what's the point of having knees named Birkayim with the blessed? Like, what's the point of these blessed knees that we have? Hopefully your knees are working okay and they're blessed. Sometimes they need a little bit of blessing to get them there. So, yes, thanks for bringing that up, Sharon. That is the same whether you're bowing for Barchu or you're bowing in the Amidah, which we'll talk about next week, right? And when to bow in the Amidah, we will go over that. But it's always the same style of bowing. Yeah. Now, there's one blessing we have, well, 1.5 blessings we haven't gotten to yet. We only really got through the Shema, but we do have blessings after that. We had creation, we had revelation, and does anybody remember from this? If you remember this, like, major props, because this is just an offhand comment in services often. Kathy, go ahead. What's the last pillar of Jewish thought?
Is it redemption?
Very good. Yes, redemption. Creation, revelation, redemption. A lot of Jewish thought is struggling and wrestling with those ideas. How do we understand God as creator? How do we understand God as revealer? And what do we do with all these laws that have been, quote, revealed to us? And then, redemption is the redemption from Egypt that drives so much of our values, right? You should be, Aaron, great question. I'm going to come back to that. You should, so redemption, like, we say how often, like, remember the stranger because you were strangers in the land of Egypt, right? And then God brought you out of Egypt. And like that is so fundamental that is our third pillar of Jewish thought. And you don't have to believe it word for word for it to be a pillar of Jewish thought. I mean, you're Jewish. There's no way you believe everything word for word. So, right. So these are not things that you must accept as faith. These are things that you are very much invited to wrestle with, and a lot of people have wrestled with before you. And so there's a lot of material to think on. Before we go to the redemption blessing, Aaron asked a great question in the chat, which is, what word do you come up from in your bow? Is it hamvorach or va'ed? So when you're leading, you bow with Barchu. And so you bow down with Barchu. Feels so weird to do without a prayer book. Barchu et Adonai hamavorach. You come up on hamavorach. And then if you're following or responding, you say, Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. So you kind of come up on le'olam va'ed. It's not very strictly governed, so you don't need to worry about it too much. There are other places where it's very strictly governed, like in Aleinu. It's very specific when you stand. But Barchu, it's a lot less specific. Did that answer your question? Great. Okay, so let's go to redemption. Let's get redeemed. So I'm going to share slides again. So so we had here, the tzitzit blessing to close out the Shema paragraphs. So just to review, we had Shema and Ve'ahavta, the V'haya'im Shemoa about rains coming in their season that we do silently, and then the tzitzit, right? And those are the 3 biblical passages to follow the Shema. Now we have this little passage we always skip. That's why you see it, this little I crossed out. But Emet Ve'atziv is just it's not really about, it's the beginning of redemption. It's the beginning of redemption, but we don't focus on it. And so it's saying, God is very true, and God will always be here for us. Our sovereign, see here at the bottom, our sovereign and our ancestors sovereign, our redeemer and our ancient ancestors redeemer, our creator and our victorious stronghold. You have always helped us and saved us. Your name endures forever. There is no God but you. Right. So this is a rabbinic passage. This is not biblical, and it introduces the idea of redemption, but it's very rarely done aloud. The only version I know of to do it aloud was written by a classmate of mine in our first year of rabbinical school, a cantorial classmate specifically, right? Like, you never hear it. And he really loves musical theater, so it's actually very hard to sing. So we're not going to do that one. But that takes us into Mi Chamocha. And Mi Chamocha is our fundamental redemption blessing. It is a passage from the Song of the Sea, that moment of being redeemed, right? That moment of crossing the sea and now being free and God bringing us out of Egypt. And so, sorry, one of the panels is beeping, but everything's good. So we have Mi Chamocha, this blessing of these 2 lines. Mi Chamocha ba'ilim Adonai, mi kamocha ne'adar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, osei fele. Those are the words that we have from the Song of the Sea, right? And then there's commentary on it. But you see here in the translation, they're quoted. Who is like you, Adonai, among all that is worshipped? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? That it's in quotes because it's from Song of the Sea. The stuff before and after it is not. That's rabbinic writing. And so we sing this, and then we conclude the redemption blessing with Tzur Yisrael. Often we'll sing Mi Chamocha as kind of a self-standing song, but it's just the selection from redemption blessings that has become the standard practice. It's not, say, a song unto itself. It's a part of a blessing, and if you end it on this page, which we pretty much always do, we forget that it's tied to the next slide, because this is the final closing blessing. Every blessing has a Baruch Atah Adonai. There's no Baruch Atah Adonai in Mi Chamocha. So this is part 1. And then if you go on to the next page with Tzur Yisrael, you get Rock of Israel, arise to Israel's defense, fulfill your promise to deliver Judah and Israel, our Redeemers, the Holy One of Israel, Adonai Tzvaot. Praised are you, Adonai, Redeemer of the people Israel. Right? Baruch Atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Ga'al is Redeemer. I'll note that in Mishkan Tefillah, in the Reform prayer book, it says it says Ge'ulat Yisrael, right? And we talk about Ge'ula instead of Goel, and the same in the Amidah, because that's talking about the noun of redemption rather than looking for a redeemer. And that's getting into shifting things out of a messianic frame of mind and more into a prophetic frame of mind. So rather than looking for someone to come redeem us again and bring us towards God's final, the world to come, we are looking for how do we redeem the world around us, right? How do we do good works in the world? So you will sometimes see that liturgical change. Now, there's a practice that with this passage, you don't separate it from the Amidah. So often, that's why we pause before it, right? So that we can have that practice continue. And so we'll say, Tzur Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael. And Kuma is the word arise. And since we're about to be standing for the Amidah, that's when we stand up. That's why we rise on that spot. It's totally fine if you stand up at the beginning of the prayer And it's also, if you miss Kuma and you see everyone standing up around you and you're like, oh, I guess I better stand up now. Also totally great. Like, this is all just practice. This is minhag and custom. This is not law. But just so you know, and you feel like you know what you're doing in that moment of the service, that's the moment to rise. Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael. That word kuma means get up. And I like to say that we are showing God how to rise for us, right? And that's hinting at a relational theology, right? Where God needs us to do some modeling in order to do God's work as well, which is not everyone's theology, but sometimes it can be what we need to settle in. Any questions about the redemption blessings? Blessing, singular. Okay, the one thing I want to note, and we're not going to go into this because we're mostly focused on Saturday morning, is that on Friday nights, on any night, you have Hashkivenu, which we don't have in the slide deck because this is a Saturday morning slide deck. But Hashkivenu is it's actually from the Talmud. It says that in the morning you say one blessing after the Shema, and in the evening you say two. So in the morning you say only the redemption blessing, and in the evening you say redemption blessing, and you also ask for God's protection, because night times are so vulnerable for us, right? Just because of the limitations of our five senses. So that is a part of the Shema blessings arc, right? Very much a part of it, but we don't have, but we don't have it here. So I want to spend the last 10 minutes of our class stepping out of the how and getting into the why and the what of what we're saying, right? Because we've touched on as we go these ideas of oneness, creation, revelation, God as creator, God as revealer of law, and that being an act of love, and God as redeemer of the people, and that being an act of God's faith and relationship with us. Where does that sit for you in your modern life?
Rabbi, can you repeat the three versions of God again, please?
Sure. Creator or creation, revealer or revelation, and redeemer or redemption. Kristen.
Okay, I'll take a stab at this because this is what it means to me. I think in modern life, it's easy to get, and I kind of brought this up too when we were talking about the preparatory blessings, it's easy to get caught up in distractions and things that seem to be a priority but aren't. And so when I think about bringing it back to these core ideas of the creation of the universe and the redemption or revelation and redemption, I think it brings you back to those really core things of having awe and gratitude for life as it exists. And I think with revelation, it's again going back to the cores of, is this the right thing to do? And taking away all of the modern distractions. Like, is this something that is truthful, kind, good? And then with redemption, it, I think, also helps, again, take away those distractions when you're, especially, dealing with people in the world and kind of stripping away all of those things and having compassion and kindness. And it's just a really good reminder to me to be grateful for the universe and the world and life, and to remember to, be a good person and be good to other people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Patty.
Well, also revelation and redemption, especially the recitation of those blessings in synagogue, we do with each other. And isn't that a core aspect of being Jewish, is that these things happen to us together?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Very,
we, and
very centered
we
on peoplehood. Yeah.
honor that memory altogether
Nice.
in the service.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to ask the inverse question now, which is, where don't these fit? Where do you look at these blessings and you're like, yeah, I have trouble with this? Ellen?
Well, I definitely have trouble with the redemption part of it. I I see, particularly at the present moment, so many things that seem unfair to me and not respectful of each individual's rights and feelings. And I wish God would swoop in and fix all of that, but I can't say that I expect that to happen. I think that's in our hands.
Well put. Kristen?
Yeah, Ellen pretty much said what I was gonna say, that sometimes people just really suck and things are really unfair and awful things happen, and it just sometimes it just doesn't, no matter how much you try and rationalize it, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just pure awful, awful, awful. And so it's kind of hard to reconcile. And it's even harder when you're trying so hard to follow the rules and, and be good and be kind and think of love and light, and there's just so much darkness to fight against it. It's kind of like, well, you know so what, it's just going to be bad and keep getting bad, so it's kind of hard.
Great. Wendy? You're muted. We need, if you could unmute.
I just want to say ditto to both Ellen and Kirsten. I have a hard time with these blessings because the blessings are acknowledging God, and I don't see where God is here, especially in today's world. And so I just, and when people say to me, well, you don't need to think of God, you can think of the universe, it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah.
So while I really want to know, what the service is all about, I also want to know why. And it seems it's really just tradition.
It can be more than tradition, and I'll get to that in a second. But I really want to hear what people are wrestling with, and that's why we're raising this, right? Because if we just accepted it blithely, it would be very thin and weak. So this is important, and I'm glad that you're all saying this. Deborah.
I think what I wrestle with is even the concept of, we're told to follow the commandments and these good things will happen and all that. I just don't understand why babies get cancer. And, there's many other things, but that's the biggest example that I can think of, is like, that just doesn't track. They haven't had any opportunity and not that I'm saying that people get cancer because they're bad people or this, that, because I don't believe that either. But that's just one of the things I don't understand. And so in that paradigm of, do follow mitzvot and these things will happen, I struggle with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Aaron.
Well, I think I might be going off a little bit of track, but whenever I have thought of all of these prayers that we've gone over tonight in general, like it's like a centering thing for me. It brings me back to back on course, because during the week I do my thing and I I fall away from all the things that I've been trying to do. And then this reminds me, like, when we're kissing the tzitzit and doing all these like choreography and the prayers, it reminds me that who I am is not who I think I am. It reminds me that like I am a creation. I am put here. I'm a soul. I'm a creation, and that God has a plan for me, and He's laid out these plans in the Torah for me of what I should you kind of follow, and it kind of gives me guides me not to pay attention to all these other things that the world is bringing to me, but to focus on these things that I can do to improve myself, which will in turn make the world a better place because I'm a better person and I'm affecting other people, which that's sort of where the redemption for me comes in, is that I miss the mark. Like I don't keep all of these things that these 618, whatever things that I'm supposed to be doing, I don't do them all, but I have them in my mind and I keep adding them as I can. And that kind of redeems me, I feel, and puts me back into focus of what I am in this world in general. And when I do that, I don't focus in on these little things like, why is this happening to these people? Why is this happening to the little child who doesn't seemingly deserve to have a disease? Like, I'm never going to know all these answers because it's not what I'm supposed to, it's not my part, it's not my role in this world to know all these answers. I just have to know that these things do happen. And a lot of times, uh, I feel like this is a reminder that God has uh, a way for things to happen. And sometimes when people don't follow these ways, it's like when you're driving down a road and there's all these rules. There's stoplights you have to stop at. And if you run the stoplight, you could have a crash. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you make it through easy, but often somebody will T-bone you or you'll crash. And that is why I think bad things happen in the world, is because we are sometimes focused outside of ourselves instead of inside of ourselves, making ourselves better to make the world a better place. And then we cause crashes and accidents and things that happen to other people. Like, who knows? Maybe somebody was trying to make $1 million creating some baby product, and then that baby was using that product and, gets sick from it, but nobody knows that's why that's happening. But that's how I think the world works. And these prayers like that.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes any sense or is relatable to anybody.
I see some nodding heads. I think it really brings us back to, you've brought us back to what this drives within us, right? And we are, the world is too big and complex to hold and apply this to every piece of it and have that make sense. And if that is as simple a truth as it sounds, which I believe it is, it never would have been the case that these words could have truly, deeply, consistently meant everything that in the simplest way that we present them to mean, right? That God redeems, that God keeps everything good, that everything bad happens in the world because God drives it to, right? A lot of the struggle around why bad things continue to happen, unjust things, cruel things, a lot of that comes from an expectation that God has the power or the presence to change it. Right? That's what drives us to the why. Like, God, this is on you, right? I thought you had this power. I thought you were present in this space. If you're good, this doesn't make sense. And there's always the response of, this is bigger and more complex than we are. That's absolutely a response that for some people is very comforting. And there's another response too, which is maybe God doesn't have that presence, right? Maybe God is not in everywhere in equal presence and intensity all the time, right? Maybe God doesn't have the power to change and affect the world that we live in. Maybe God's power comes from that instinct inside of us, or those moments of goodness that do arise. But to expect that God would have the power to protect every good person who becomes sick unjustly, maybe we're expecting something that's not actually something we can expect. Right? And so there's there's an old truism, right? All good, all present, all powerful, you can get 2 out of 3. And that's one way to approach theology. It's like, which ones am I wrestling with? Which ones sit well with me? Between all present, all good, all powerful. Also, all of this is kind of predicated upon believing in God in the first place, right? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And so we don't have the time tonight to get into the contrast between a personal God, right? A God that's kind of a being with a thought and intention, and an impersonal God, which is when people talk about like the universe, the goodness of the universe, right? And that's not a God that you have. It's, for example, not a God you use third person pronouns with, right? It's not he, she, right? That is an impersonal theology. And so all of these are ways to approach that question of why is this a thing? Why do we have this? And if we're going to say these blessings, which we say them every week, twice a day in some practices, they're not always going to be intended as, I bless you, God, because I see this to be true in the world. They can be call-outs, right? They can be, God, I'm calling you to your better behavior, and I see a spot where we need you, and I need you to show up here, right? I need to call this out so that I feel pulled to make a difference in this space if it's something that we're able to change. Or it can be I acknowledge that there is something much bigger about, there's something much bigger than me, and I can't change it, but I have a really strong desire, and I wish, I hope, I pray, that if I reach out into the divinity of the universe, that will have an impact on the world. Right? There's a theology around Leviticus that says God is like a nuclear power plant. God has a lot of power. We don't know how that power works. Sometimes it explodes in unjust ways. And yet we try to put in the goodness. We try to put in good things, good deeds, good prayers. And we hope that that contributes to the goodness of the system. And we know that there will be bad things that come out of us and come out of other people, and that kind of poisons the well, and that might create one of those explosions or those lashing out. And it's not going to be a quid pro quo. It's not going to be like, oh, because I put in something bad's going to come back to me. We know that the world's not that simple. But when we put bad things out into the world, there is a chance that they could help grow the darkness. And that's why we spend so much of our time on this earth trying to grow the light. We are 9 minutes over, so I'm going to call us now. And Julia and Ellen, I'll invite you to stay. I see your hands. So I'll stay on for a few minutes so we can talk. But I do want to make sure that everyone else has a chance to go, because I'm sorry that I've held this late. But thank you so much for starting this conversation, because this is one that we're going to continue.
Thank you.
This was great. The last little bit.
Thank you.
I love the whole thing, but the last little bit was my favorite. So thank you.
This is my favorite class so far. I really love this one.
I'm glad. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good night.
you.